Well, it's finally here, the Cass Review. And obviously was a long-awaited thing. And I'm glad that it's here, finally. We've managed to get our hands on, what is a 388-page report, I believe it is. I imagine that now, currently, we are all rushing through it, reading it in detail, examining every word and every paragraph. And we'll see over the next few days many people commenting and many people coming forward to discuss this very important and deeply professional. It is so well done in terms of being a report that it lays out exactly what the situation is, but does so within a very limited framework. So I think from our perspective as individuals, and particularly from myself in the work that I do with other people, with people who are on the programme, that we need to be very clear about what I think this is. Because what I say influences people, and I want to make sure that what I say is considered and not just madness. If you want madness, go talk to the jester, okay? So I think after the first read, which I must admit, I had to skip some of it because A, I don't understand some of the medical language in depth, or the procedural stuff, which I'm not particularly interested in at any rate. And to say that this is a navigation of a very difficult arena is exactly what it is. I mean, Cass has had to navigate this very harsh landscape, which is a very difficult situation. And we've already seen this morning Wes Streeting coming out talking on behalf of Labour, who I'm sorry, Wes, I don't believe a word you say. I really am sorry. And I would urge you to look more to the article from Sajid Javid, who has provided some input in the Telegraph. The Jester will have something on that for you, I imagine, in the next couple of days. Sadly for me, my initial reaction, and this is just me giving my initial reactions, I'm not telling you I'm right, I'm saying this is for your consideration. For me, I was absolutely dismayed to see that the article, the document, is written in the language of the cult. It is written in the language of gender. It is written in the language of queer theory. Not only does it use the acronym LGBTQ+, it assumes from its very outset that there is such a thing as gender identity. It also assumes that there is such a thing as gender dysphoria. And it also assumes that there is such a thing as a need for transition. Now, you know as well as I do, because you've heard me speak about it before in various ways, my opinion is that this entire thing is an educational problem before it is a medical one. And what the Cass report seems to have done to me, for me, Cass turned up and smacking me on the head. For me, it's stemmed the flow. It will stem the flow of the mutilation, the castration and the creation of eunuchs out of gay men. It will stem the flow of the removal of the breasts of lesbians. It will stem the flow of the medical experimentation on gay, lesbian, autistic teenagers with ADHD, and also makes recommendations for young people, which in the terms of the report is up to 30. I expect swift action from the NHS, and I imagine it would be swift. And I expect swift action from the government, particularly in putting pressure on Wales and Scotland to stop the conversion therapy that is trans the gay away. We have to remember that Cass was given what most certainly was a poison chalice, and was given that with a very distinct boundary. That boundary being, how do we care for the cohort at the centre of this, children at the centre of this? How do we ensure that we are giving them the best possible care? And the answer to that question seems to be, we don't know what the best possible care is. There is no evidence. The evidence is completely lacking. Now, this means, as a result of that, Cass stating, I think quite clearly that there is no evidence, that WPATH, Stonewall, the LGBT Foundation, any other organisation, Mermaids, the Charities Commission must begin an immediate investigation into these organisations, and they must be shut down and defunded. Along with every other organisation, such as universities, that are pushing gender, that are pushing this nonsense of gender identity and trans. The universities have got to start saying, right, we're closing the department, and they should do it, and they should do it with extreme prejudice. Let them sue you. From our perspective as individuals, it's never been more important that we, as individuals, we understand what's going on and we maintain our strength in having conversations one-to-one with people, many of whom are going to have an awful lot of questions that need asking in the next few weeks. We need to be able to do that. We need to be able to do it clearly. Make no bones about it. This has provided a brilliant bulwark between the cult and its need to access children. This has provided that bulwark, and I'm glad that it has done so. However, this is the middle position. This is the middle part of the overarching process that takes people and leads them to believe in these cult-like beliefs and these religious beliefs around gender identity, these crazy ideas that you have a gendered soul. That starts much earlier. That starts in school, and in some cases in primary schools. It is absolutely imperative at this point that a national review of education should take place, and it should be staffed by, obviously, educationists, and it should ensure that there is no ideological capture amongst that group at all. And those groups must then produce for schools immediate guidance that calls for them to cease teaching gender identity as anything other than a cult belief system. We must provide these educational materials to schools, and there must be a mandatory element about it, whether that be through legislation or government guidance, which I forget guidance, I think, because nobody's listening to you. Cass has provided us with something to build on. But there are many of us, particularly gay men, who are now asking the question, right, who's going to be held responsible for doing this to us? There are women who are asking the question, who's going to be held responsible for doing this to us? And still, I feel that the safeguarding mentioned within Cass is not strong enough. Until we recognise that the adoption of a trans identity or a belief in gender identity or queer theory and all that comes with it is itself a major safeguarding red flag, we will get nowhere. We've stemmed the flow. That's what we've done. The battle is won on that front, I think, by Cass. But the war, ladies and gentlemen, is far from over. And for those of you that think we shouldn't be calling it a war at all because there are people at the centre of this, the people at the centre of this that I was most concerned about are now beginning to get the protection they deserve off the back of this report. Everything else has got nothing to do with them. Everything else is not children. Everything else is LARPing men. Everything else is LARPing women. Everything else is lying clinicians. Everything else is lying psychologists. Everything else is traitorous teachers. And if you think for 1 minute that I don't see that as a war, then you are equally as discombobulated as the idiots I intend to fight. This is not the end. This is the beginning of the end. We keep fighting. We do so strongly through argument, the Enlightenment, the need for free speech, and everything else that my Warrior Teachers Programme stands for. Because now it's more important than ever. They are going to squirm like stuck pigs. They're going to scream that we need trans-affirming care. We need to make sure that they close the loopholes as soon as possible. Nothing, no external prescriptions from the UK for these things. And that's what pharmacists should be told, on pain of criminal repercussions. That's how we do it. It's time to cut the entire thing off. In the meantime, we now have to start to think about what we need to do to ensure that when that child enters school at 5 years old, the first thing that they're told when this nonsense comes up is that it's just a belief. It's just a belief. You don't have to believe it. It's not true. There's no evidence to it at all. And as that child grows forward, we teach them how this happened, why it happened, who is involved, what the outcomes were, and how they can go on to live a clear life, because gender identity is personality and gender expression is fashion. Cass almost said as much when she talked about the individual need for a holistic approach. She almost said as much, but I felt couldn't. Gender identity is personality. You can make that a character. Gender expression is fashion. Nobody cares what you wear. That's where we are. The eradication of this critical social justice nonsense must be absolutely and utterly our priority now from the education system. And I look forward to seeing what everybody else has to say. Thank you for listening to me. Now go watch Edijester. I think he's done the Sajid Javras thing, you know. I don't know what he gets up to. Like the new shirt. I'll see you later. Bye-bye.